What's going on, guys? Kai here. In today's video, I want to talk to you about the Ranger rework. I want to talk about if it's a zero or a hero. Let's jump into it. So before we talk about how I've been testing it, let's talk about what was actually changed. So we got the passives right here. Hawkeye for marksman. Each cast of Sky Shatter increase multi-arrow damage by 20% for the next attack up to 100%. And Sky Shatter, if a Sky Shatter is critical, reduce multi-arrow cooldown by 3 seconds. That's going to be very, very important when we talk about that. Wind Chaser, nothing really changed besides this third part. After casting Shock Arrow, which doesn't exist, we'll talk about what that actually is, gain a damage bonus equal to 20% of cooldown reduction, including Wind Chaser cooldown reduction for 5 seconds with a 10-second cooldown. So first I want to talk about Wind Chaser because it was barely touched. Not barely touched, but you know what I mean. It wasn't the biggest change. So Shifting Bolt, which I guess is supposed to be, what do they call it? Shock Arrow. So Shifting Bolt is the same AoE, but it doesn't knock down anymore, and it's actually further. I don't have a bow on this account. I played on a different account to do the testing. This is my NA58 account to talk over the things, and I have some some slides and stuff to show some numbers once we get there. But it's actually 50% to 75% further range than before. And if you are curious how to test that, when you click a skill, you don't have to just click and be done. You can, let's use this as an example, move it around and cast it from there. And I looked at old footage from the old shifting arrow to the new one, and it is much further distance-wise. You don't do the backup to create distance, and you don't do the knockdown anymore, which hurts its mobility. And that's really the thing with all of the changes, is they really hurt the mobility that Ranger really had. They were the most mobile class in the game, and now they're not. So Strength of Nature is the same. You know, that's your bread and butter. That is the reason you go Wind Chaser, is for that heal, movement speed, and cleanse, especially in PvP. Now, what's super interesting about Shifting Bolt is both the other skills, Break Free and Butterfly Effect, augment your Shifting Bolt. I really like that mechanic. It just wasn't implemented right here. So Break Free is actually a decent ability with a if it had a lower cooldown, I'd consider using it because it's 18 seconds and Shifting Bolt is 10 seconds. So you end up in a weird, awkward situation where Break Free Shifting Bolt is decent, but you can't always do Break Free Shifting Bolt. You have to do Break Free Shifting Bolt, Break Free Shifting Bolt, which put you in some awkward situations. Break Free mobilizes the target, meaning they can't move effectively a route. And Butterfly Effect, it hits like a truck, and it makes Shifting Bolt hit harder, but Butterfly Effect is just so bad that it locks you in place, and you have to sit there for 3 waves of attacks that anybody can just sidestep and just get around no problem. Now let's talk about Marksman, that got the biggest changes, and I'd like to talk to you about how I think these were actually okay. And if we take a look, the first two are effectively the same. Vortex Arrow and Shattering Arrow are effectively the same, but they make your next normal basic attack into Sky Shatter. Let me show you some number differences with Sky Shatter. So the first one I have right here is I checked my basic attack range of damage to see what happens if I crit, what happens if I whatnot. So we have 4,842. That's obviously going to be a different number on different mobs, what have you, but just to show you the big difference. And because crit damage was changed to how it shows, it's no longer yellow, I did a lot of testing to check the damage range. So this will do anywhere from 4,800 to about 6,200 with a crit. Now if we take a look at this one, so the special, the augmented basic, it does a arrow in the front, effectively a vortex arrow. And if we take a look, it's 75k, and it'll go up to right around 90k, right in that range. About 88 is the range that it's hitting for. So, I mean, a 5k basic or a 75k line, it's definitely different. Now, there is some talk that you have to do like a turnaround before you do this basic, and that does hurt your mobility. But let's jump into what else was changed. So multi-arrow is kind of the same as it was before. Before it dealt more damage based off of debuffs, and the other skills did debuffs. Now it does damage based off of triggers, and it gets triggers from you doing the other skills. So kind of the same concept. And it also gets cooldown based off of Sky Shatter critting instead of just all crits, which makes it, you don't do as many multi-arrows, but you hit harder with multi-arrow. And this is the same animation, 1, 2, 3, which isn't really that bad, but then when you put in Sky Shatter, it really slows you down. Now the big boon for us is Never Miss. I looked at the numbers all the way up, and it appears to go up to 25% crit rate and 50% crit damage for 6 seconds with a 23-second cooldown, but you have to remember the outside, it lowers it by 5 seconds, putting us at 18 seconds, making us in a very interesting situation. So a third of the time we have 25% crit rate and 50% crit damage. And then I believe people are sleeping on the last part, that it gives you an enhanced multi-arrow stack, but if you currently have 0, it automatically makes it 2. So you really want to open with Never Miss into multi-arrow and then do everything else. And I told you all I would come up with a build for this. And let me check my notes over here. Alright, so what we're trying to do here is, from our class advancements, Ranger, you want to go Marksman all the way through for flat crit and crit percentage. And then you also want to go Cannon. And why that is, this is assuming, we're going to talk about both PvP and PvE. But in both cases, we're assuming you have a scholar on your team, specifically a priest on your team. So you're going to go with bow for marksman for crit rate, and then cannon armor for the same kind of numbers as we see, and crit damage. Now what's important to note is over here with craftsman, Netherfire, when you go into overload, it increases your crit damage by 50%. It is not limited to craftsman. Unlike armor, the overload passive, which increases your crit rate and crit damage by 35%, that is limited to the armorer, whereas Netherfire's 50% is not. And then we're really trying to go into our damage windows with Never Miss and multi-arrow. What we really want to do is start off in armorer, build up our overload, and then use overload windows as our Never Miss windows. So we get up our overload, hit Netherfire, swap to bow, Never Miss, into multi-arrows, followed up with Shatter Strike Basic. And that's our main burst, and that is the best that Ranger is able to do right now. Assuming that you have a Scholar on your team that can do Star Blessing for 10% attack and 10% crit bonus. That's going to be very, very powerful. I think this is the highest amount of crit possible, allowing you to actually crit in some of the higher stages of Path of Fire Sword. I know once you get up to that 450 whatever plus range, it really becomes a stat check, but I think this is the closest you get to hitting those numbers. In PvE, really, I'm sorry, but the Ranger, the Marksman, is relegated to a clan boss character. You're going to do some decent clan boss damage. As I said, if you have a Star Blessing on your team, if you're able to do your never miss windows, and this requires some careful play from the Ranger. You can't just auto this and get some good numbers. You really have to effectively be an armorer half the time, a little bit more than half the time, to always have the Nether Fire bonus up, and then swap into never miss, multi arrow, basic, vortex arrow, basic, shattering arrow, basic. And then you swap back to cannon and then start it all over again. And that's really what it's trying to do. It's going to do some good damage. If you have good stats, you're going to be fighting for those top lists. Unfortunately, it is not where you can, it's not like Judge, where you can literally just sit there AFK every once in a while, swap to Mechanician, put down your bots, and then swap back to Judge. But it'll be able to fight for those numbers. And in PvP, it's really hard to not go Wind Chaser because we have Strength of Nature. But when if you're able to have a good front line and you're not going to be disrupted very much, you can do some interesting things like Marksman with Never Miss, Multi Arrows, Break Free, and Shifting Bolt. Because with Break Free, it immobilizes them, which is a CC effect for something like Top League, and allows you to go off that way. As far as wills and generations, I actually have some things I was testing, and they had the biggest numbers I was able to find. So in PvE, I like Soul Hunt, Fighting Will Strike, and Break Free. You don't have to use all three. These are the options. I think if I was going to be picking them, I would go with Soul Hunt and Fighting Will Strike. Obviously going with Fighting Will and Fierce Attack as the wills. And that's because Fighting Will Strike gives you cooldown, which is going to make you have bigger never miss windows and have you in Netherfire more often. Overload more often. And in PvP, still really like Soul Hunt and Break Free for your things like Top League and Crystal Battlefield. As far as the other options, I like Slaughter, Fierce Attack, and Rigidity in PvP. Rigidity because you're kind of a dip in and out class, and you dip in, you go and do your never miss window of damage, and then that's primarily when they're going to be hitting you, and during that time Rigidity is going to give you some decreased damage received and allow you to blow your load. And if they live, I mean, you got to book it, you got to get out of there, but you can't get out of there unless you have Break Free, Shifting Bolt, but then you're losing damage because you don't have Vortex Arrow and Shattering Arrow. I told you all I would find a build that works for the new Ranger, and this does for PvP and PvE as listed. The issue is it does not keep up with some of the other options. Because of that, Naya with the company is having the engineers work overtime, and they're looking at reworking several things. I've been added back to the program, so I'm going to be talking face to face with some of them. Not face to face, but word of mouth and a chat channel that we have about some feedback. Let me know in the comment section down below what you would like to see. And anyone who watched my videos from before knows that I always had codes I'd like to give out. I don't have them currently, but Daku, the lead mod on the official Discord, is working on getting me new codes. Before, it was 200 sapphire and a stamina potion. And what I'm working on is trying to get white or black dyes for you guys. It's not a done deal, but that is what I'm pushing for. If that doesn't happen, it'll be sapphires again. And that means that you'll leave a comment down below, tell me what you like or dislike about the video with the keyword, and be entered into the giveaway. But that's my thoughts on the Ranger.